To get a really brief message from me this morning. No applause. That's good. That's good. It's going to be very brief because then we're going to let some folks share from the mission trip to Jamaica and share a bit more of their story. We've been in this series on Bless, trying to help us figure out how do we do outreach. And it's based out of the passage in Genesis chapters 12, where God comes to Abraham and says, I will bless you, but I'm blessing you for a reason because I want you to be a blessing to others. And this church, this is what's so much fun here. You know you've been blessed, and that blessing just keeps getting handed off, and we get to see it happen over and over, from being able to fund the mission trip to Jamaica, to do that fairly easily, to be quite honest. To be giving tons and tons of food that we stack up here for the food pantries, all kinds of ways. This church just, we know what this is about in so many ways. And yet, as we try to ponder how do we reach the lost, it's still a challenge for us. And so that's where we've been talking about some different ways to do that beyond the money, the financial blessings. And so we've been talking about several different pieces. The B stood for begin with prayer. And that's maybe a huge challenge for some. And some of you are like, I got that, I'm doing it. But to pray for your neighbor. Can you jump to the next slide so we see that one? There we go. So that was the first letter that we're looking at. We're using this app or the website, Bless Every Home, to try and pray for every home in the area. And that's well on its way. We've also gotten some maps in. And so we've got some big maps that we're going to be able to put up out here shortly. And we're going to track whether we're praying for every household in the Waupun, Alto, and Brandon area. And we're going to make that happen. So that's kind of fun. The second one we talked about was to listen, to just pause long enough to go listen to your neighbor, to not worry about trying to preach a gospel or share something that's scary for you, but to just listen, to ask good questions. The next one we talked about would be to invite them to actually come over for a meal, to connect with them, to eat with them, because that's where even more conversation happens, and it's a great thing. Last week we talked about serving, stepping up and getting involved and doing something with your gifts. And so we asked you to sign up for next Sunday. We've got not only the deal at the farm, but we're also doing an outreach in the park at Meet in the Fields. And so we've still got sign-ups out there. If you can help Sunday night or Sunday morning with any of those things, we would love it. But we also need help with VBS and community table. But it doesn't really require all of this kind of formality either. You can simply go over to your neighbor and say, hey, can I help with your yard work? Some of you are coaching different teams and volunteering in the community in that way. That's what it's about. That's serving. It's being in our community and loving people. And so today we reached the last one, which is to share your story. And this, I don't know, some of these are really scary for some of you, for all of us in some ways, I think. But this is maybe one of the scariest, to actually have to tell your story, what God has done in your life. And so I wanted to read, I'm not going to read the whole story. In fact, from Mark chapter 5, I'm just going to read the last couple lines. But it's a story of a man who's had lots and lots of trouble. Jump to the next slide here for us. We've talked a lot about the Gospel of Mark and this area of Galilee, so just above the red arrow, really. The Sea of Galilee is right there. This story takes place after they go across. So they go from the top of the lake really down to the bottom, where they've now entered into a less Jewish community, a pagan community would be what it would be known as, and they didn't love Jesus, and it was a very different environment for Jesus to go to. And he's really not there very long in this passage. But he's there long enough to talk with a gentleman who's possessed by many demons. And you've probably heard this story if you've been around the church very long. This man is crazy, crying out night and day. If they try to put him in chains, he would break these chains, and at night he'd cut himself with stones. This man was truly crazy, and the people in the city knew this, and they tried to have him protect himself, but by putting these chains on him. I would think they're just trying to restrain him in some way, but they couldn't do it. I would guess they heard him crying out night and day. Last night we had a cat in our window again. You know how cats are really, they just purr so softly? Well, in the middle of the night when they climb in your window and they go, meow, 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 you love me, right? Over and over. I finally got a cup of water and threw it out the window at the cat, kind of thing. She left for a little while. It'd drive you crazy. And I can just imagine that's a bit of what they're feeling with this guy. He's crazy and just annoying. They can hear him in the cemetery out the back of the house, crying out, making weird noises, and they don't know what to do with it. Jesus comes and he casts the demons out into the pigs and they run away. Verse 19 says, Jesus said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." Go home. He wanted to follow Jesus. Let me get in the boat and go with you. I don't want to hang out with these folks. He says, no, go home and tell them how much God has done for you. Tell them about God's mercy. And so the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis. So that's an area of 10 cities, that whole gray area on the bottom of the picture up there. That's the Decapolis. He went to that area and went around it and shared his story. And all the people were amazed. Your story doesn't have to be as dramatic as this one. I had 10,000 demons and they were cast out. And now, well, that's not our story. But we do have a story. In fact, we have many stories. And we need to realize what those stories are and be able to share them. And so instead of me explaining more about that, I'm going to have Jessa take over and have folks share. You've got a video first? Okay, so that's ready. So get that video ready. Your goal today, though, is to figure out what is your story to be able to say. And you probably have more than one. They all just gained a whole bunch going on a mission trip. So how could you share that story with others about what God has done? Let's watch the video.
More than all we ask, than all we seek, all our hopes and dreams, you are immeasurably more than we can know, than we can pray, all our words can say, you are immeasurably more. There's nothing greater than your love. You're more There's nothing sweeter on this earth. You're more than we can imagine. Our hearts respond to who you are. It's you, oh Lord, that we adore. You are more. You are more. You're more than we can imagine. You are more. You joy, never failing love. You are coming. You are coming. No eye has seen, no ear has heard what is coming. What is coming? Never-ending joy, never failing love. You are coming. You are coming. There's nothing greater than your love, more than we can imagine. There's nothing sweeter on this earth, more than we can imagine. Our hearts respond to who you are, it's you, Lord, that we adore. You are more, you are more, you're more than we can imagine. We can imagine. You are more, you're more than we can imagine.
If I can, oh, is this on? If I can have the rest of the team come up here, that would be great, so I don't have to stand up here by myself. We showed a video before we left that had pictures of the kids that we were going to meet and just asking you guys to pray for us. And in that video, we shared 3 goals that we had for this mission trip. The goal number 1 was to enrich life. We wanted to enrich the lives of the students and the staff that were going to be at CCCD. And if you forgot what CCCD stands for, it's Caribbean Christian Center for the Deaf. And then the second goal that we had was to engage. And so our goal for that was to engage in work projects while the kids were at school. Some people will talk about that, but really to just help them in their need with building some stuff. And then the third goal was to encourage growth. And in my head, to encourage growth meant to encourage growth in the kids that are there. And God had a different plan for that. I think He encouraged our growth so much more than what we encouraged them to grow. We enriched their lives and we had fun with them, but I think the change was in us. So I'm going to have some people share about how we were able to enrich the kids' lives. So Courtney, Larry, Caleb, Sam, Jordan, Bridget.
Well, I guess I'm sharing first. Towards the middle of the week when tensions were starting to rise between everybody, and we were hot and tired and just all around, I had to step out because I was starting to get a little overwhelmed with everything going on. So I stepped out, and when it was time for some of the kids to go to bed, they went around and they could obviously see that, some people were having a rough time, and they came up to me and some other people and gave us all hugs, which just kind of lightened the mood up.
Okay, so when I was there the beginning of the week, I didn't really get out of my comfort zone. But then this little boy named Akil came up to me, and at the end of the week, he would always put his arms up for me to hold him. And yeah, that was what my week consisted of, holding Akil.
I met a boy named Jaden, and I signed to him that we were friends, and he ran over and hugged me, and just that moment made the entire trip worth it. I'm also very thankful for Marty coming on the trip. Not only did he bless everybody there, but he blessed all the people that went on the trip with us.
Well, biggest thing, that I got out of this is you go to Jamaica and they go to Jamaican deaf kids and you think they're going to be so different than you, but we get up there and it's amazing how similar those kids were to ours. And one of example, one of the first days, they come up and draw pictures of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors, and they go around and ask our kids, oh, who are you going for? And every time someone would point to one, and about half the kids would be giving them high fives and stuff, and the other half would be booing them and giving them crap. And also, it's those little kids, they just always had so much energy. And the first day, I made a mistake of letting one of the kids go on my back, in which they thought is the permission for the rest of the week. They could just jump on my back whenever it could. And I would always hate to have to say no to them, but even when they have to go eat or go to sleep, they always want to jump on your back and have you carry them everywhere. And yeah.
Going into the week, I just kind of thought like we're going to Jamaica, it's gonna be nice, and we're gonna go on vacation. But we got there and I saw these homes, they were torn down and everything. I was just going through and I didn't know what was going on. And we got there and there was all these kids and we didn't talk to each other because we kind of couldn't, and we didn't know what to do. And as you got to know the kids, they just had so much joy. I just found it unbelievable as how much joy these kids can have in their lives, because I'm thinking, like, you guys are deaf, you guys can't hear what's going on around you. I don't understand why you guys are so happy. And I don't think the entire week I saw one kid frown or get mad or sad or anything, because they're just so happy to be alive and so happy to be around the people that they love and they can share their feelings about, and people that they can talk to.
I don't think Sabrina was able to make it this morning. One of her kids was sick overnight. So I'm just going to share a little something that she sent me. Sabrina is in school for nursing, and on Wednesday night during the trip, we went to an infirmary, which is basically like a nursing home with a lot worse care, basically, than the United States. But it was all like older people that couldn't take care of themselves, or people that had like injuries or something that they just couldn't take care of themselves anymore. So Sabrina wrote, I think things really sunk in for me when we went to the infirmary. I was still not feeling well, hot and uncomfortable. I'll just tell you right now, Sabrina got sick Wednesday morning and Pamela got a little sick Thursday morning. And I'll share a little bit more about that later, about how God answered our prayers with that. So Sabrina was sick that morning. She said, and then she got to the infirmary, and it says, I met these people who had nothing but praise for God. They didn't sit and complain about life. They were enjoying every breath they were given. And it was like, whoa. So that's Sabrina's. Is there anybody else in the first category? No, okay. The second category is engage. So we're going to have some people talk about the work that we did. So during the school day, we would work on like building projects, and then when the kids would get out of school at 2 o'clock, we would be done, and then we would get to play with the kids at night. So some talk about work projects. I have Colton, Pamela, and Peyton.
So we split up into a couple different groups. There was a painting group and my group. What my group did was Chris decided that we were to clean out 2 rooms. One had 30 steel beams that were made for laying out concrete. And then the other one, we had to pickaxe and level out to about 7 feet, and then wheelbarrow all that out. It was very tiring. But at the end of the week, what made that all worth it was when all the kids came out and they decided to come help work, and that was the best. And then I think it was Junior, he came up to us later that day and he said they only help out work with the ones that they like.
Okay, so I was in the group where we had to go painting, and we basically just painted all the walls, painted the ceilings and everything, and just fixed the home up. And so what most of you women know that when you paint, even with the AC and all the fans, it's still very warm. And well, we only had a ceiling fan, and it was very warm in the 100-degree weather trying to paint the house. And so throughout that time, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to paint, it's so hot. But then I just stopped and looked at all the people we were working with, and they were just so filled with so much joy and peace and happiness, and I just prayed that that's what I would have. So while we were working, we had these 30 minutes set aside for each person to go and pray about what you felt you needed to pray about. And in that day, I prayed about just finding these joy and happiness that they had, because that's just what I wanted, and that's what God had set us out to do.
All right, I was also on the painting crew and saved some of the girls from lizards. We had lots of little things watching us paint. And Bridget and I painted outside. We had, like, on the porch, it was a metal thing that surrounded it. I don't know what you call it, but it was pretty cool. And then the other one, Joel and I were fortunate enough to eat dinner with Glenford and Karen, who there was a picture of us. They're both deaf, and they work on campus there. Glenford is like the do-it-all maintenance guy. By the end of the week, you couldn't really tell that they were deaf and we were hearing, because we are communicating pretty well. So.
And our last category, this has the most people sharing in it, is encourage growth. So like I said, we had the goal of encouraging growth in the students there, but they have some really awesome teachers and people working with them that encourage their growth in Christ daily. And so God chose to bless us by encouraging our growth in Christ. So we're going to have a few people come up and share.
First of all, I'd like to say that when Jessa first came up with the idea of going to Jamaica, I know that there were some doubts, and even people that doubted supported them. I'm here to tell you that don't need to doubt, because this was one huge blessing, both for the people that we went there to see and for our group. This group of 23 people I hardly knew before we went on this trip. And it took me a week just to figure out all the Coltons and Caden and Courtney and Cannon, and I'm forgetting one. But they were such a blessing to watch as they showed God's light through their actions. The way that they intermingled with the other people, the way that they supported me in my time of 1 year after Lynn had passed away, was truly God shining through them. And then there's Mother Jessa. I call her that because she had this bag that God filled with anything and everything that anybody needed. And at the end of the day, and even at lunchtime and supper time, she would pull out God's word, and we would have devotions out of that bag. I can't tell you how much these people and this trip was such a godsend, and how much we appreciated your support and your prayers.
This Jamaica mission trip was a blessing for me to get to know God better and how He tries to get you out of your comfort zone, to be a blessing to other people. Something that made me get out of my comfort zone was going to the infirmary. Seeing those people in that one room made me sick to my stomach. The one thing that I learned coming out of that place was how God touched their hearts even though they had close to nothing. And that is one thing that I learned from this mission trip, is realizing that Jesus Christ is everywhere. Not just in our homes or hometowns, He's all over the world.
To me, the best part of the mission trip had to have been the kids, getting to learn their life stories, playing with them, learning their games, and communicating with them. I was able to take a bunch of selfies and pictures with the kids, but unfortunately lost everything when my phone took a swim in the ocean with me. Though, God will never I will never forget the joy that God gave me, and all the people there, even though they had so little compared to all of us.
Our trip to Jamaica was amazing. I personally saw a different side of each of the kids. Youth group is a lot different than being placed in a foreign country. So each of us had the chance to feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, and we had grown from that experience. My favorite part, though, was the relationships everyone gained while we were there. Some of us came home with a new love interest and potentially a new boyfriend, and then also created friendships that were unforgettable. So ultimately, Jamaica was amazing, and it changed each of us.
So, Sam had kind of mentioned this earlier, but their laughs and giggles were the thing that got me the most. The worst part was that they couldn't even hear it, though. They didn't know their own laugh. They were absolute beautiful giggles, and I'll never forget them. And I hope that they can have those laughs for as long as possible. Chris had kind of mentioned, the leader there, that the kids here, when they get out of school, they leap for joy for summer. And for them, a lot of them cry because they go home and they can't talk to anyone. No one knows their language, no one can sign with them, and it's just really hard for them. So they're excited to be at school. So just makes me thankful for what we went through and that we could go through all of that, and thankful for what I have.
Every day we were there, we could definitely feel God's presence. In the morning, at lunchtime, at night. For me, one day that it overflowed out of my eyes, was the morning that the kids gave their program to us. And every grade had put together their own program, but the one that really touched me the most was when the little kids were singing and signing, and you could feel God's love in that room pouring out of everybody.
So on this trip, on this trip for me, what I learned was just to love people more deeply. I grew up with my mom working at the food pantry, and I've kind of grown up to learn to love people. But this trip kind of instilled like a deep, deep love for people, and just getting out of your comfort zones and sacrificing your flesh to love people. I mean, we were in like 100-degree weather, and I mean, me and the guys were sledgehammering and shoveling gravel and cement, and I mean, it was hard work. So, I mean, it was the most uncomfortable time of my life, but it was the best time of my life, and I bawled my eyes out when we had to leave, and it was really cool to see some of these big macho guys bawl their eyes out, because it just kind of showed you how much they really got to love the kids.
Yes, I'm one of those macho guys she was referring to. A couple things that I saw in the video there, I don't know if you saw, but the pure joy from the smiles, not only on our faces, but also on the kids and the people that we were there. It was just pure joy. And the other thing after watching the video was, I'm not quite sure why Dancing with the Stars hasn't called me yet, but that's a whole nother thing. But I'm just going to share, these guys covered pretty much our mission trip, but I'm going to share some statistic stuff that Chris, the director, would you call him, of the CCCD shared with us. And he said that 1% of the world's population, estimates are, is deaf. In a developing country or underdeveloping country, Jamaica is considered developing, it's probably more like 3% of the population, which means that in Jamaica, again, these are all estimates, but somewhere between 5,500 and 7,000 school-aged children are deaf. They currently have like 630 kids in school. That means how many kids are out there that don't know how to speak. They don't know how to read. They can't, a lot of the kids that we talked with, we'd write on paper and they'd write back, until we learned some stuff. But all these kids, and adults for that matter, that have no way to communicate with people, so how can they possibly know who Jesus is? And that really touched me, because if you take the world's population, this is another statistic, of that percentage, that would be the 5th largest nation in the world if you put all the deaf people into one nation. How many people are out there that have never heard of Jesus and God simply because they have no way to communicate? That's all. And that really just, it makes me want to do more, not only there, but here. And that's what, these guys are amazing. I say it for youth group, all that stuff, but it was just like Marty touched on, but to see them hanging out and playing with the kids, and me too, and it was just pure joy. You didn't need to communicate because we all loved Jesus. We all have that bond. It just comes together. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to thank you guys, everybody here. Without you, we could not have done this from a financial standpoint, from prayers. I mean, it's just amazing to know, and I hope you know this, that you changed 24 people's lives. Not to mention the people that were there, but 24, some of which are here. You changed our lives. There's no doubt about it, in some way, shape, or form. That's first. And then the second thing I want to end with is, when Jessa first came up with this whole Jamaica trip idea, there were a few skeptics out there. Yes, Marty touched on it, and rightfully so. I mean, we're taking kids and high schoolers to Jamaica. But Jessa felt God wanted us to go, and she deserves all the credit and all the praise in that sense. She felt God saying go, and Jessa, kudos to you, because you had this thing, God said, go here, and you stuck with it, and we all were changed because of it. So thank you.
I just want to thank you guys as well. Thank you for all of the support that you gave us, whether it was financially, and I know that all of you were supporting us in prayer. Prayer is what made this trip go so well. I came back and I told my parents, there are 0 negative things that I can say about this trip. I mentioned before that Pamela and Sabrina both got a little bit sick a couple of the days, but with that 30 minutes of prayer that we each spent every day that we had to work, those days we prayed that Sabrina would get better quickly and that Pamela would get better quickly. And I know that you guys were praying for us here even though you didn't know what was going on in the moment. And I fully believe that that is the reason they were better within a couple hours. God really taught us the power of prayer through this week. From the airport to the trip and the airport back, nothing went wrong. And it was incredible. That was definitely God showing his hand in all of this. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, one of the house parents there that spends a lot of time with the different teams and stuff, he continued to say to us toward the end of the week that our group was one of the best groups that they have ever had there. And I am just so proud of these kids and the adults that came with us, because they showed Jesus in everything that they did. They showed Jesus in the joy on their faces. I think I saw more joy in these kids' faces in 1 week than I ever have in youth group. And it's not to say that they're not joyful in youth group, but it was overwhelming joy the whole week. But I'm just so proud of everything that they accomplished, even though it was 100 degrees and humid every day when we worked. They continued to push on and work as hard as they could, and they didn't complain. Of course, all of us said, oh, it's so hot, oh, I'm so sweaty, but they didn't complain, and they didn't stop working, and that is just incredible to me. The last thing I want to share about is sponsorship. Each one of the kids that's at the campus needs about 10 sponsors in order to be fully sponsored at the school. Sponsorship covers their tuition and their room and board and just paying the teachers and their food when they're at the campus, because it's basically like a boarding school where they come and live for the week. And so each kid needs 10 sponsors, and I think there's only about maybe 4 of the about 30 kids that go there that are fully sponsored. And we could just let last week, or the week that we were in Jamaica, just be a week out of our lives. But I am hoping and praying that after hearing the stories this morning, and hopefully you guys come and ask us about more stories because we all have more to tell, you guys will want to sponsor one of these kids. I think it's about $32 a month, and that will help them go to school, and it'll help them be one of those kids that is able to have that communication. And I know from watching those kids that they are learning about Jesus every day, and it is so worth the $32 a month to sponsor one of these kids. So afterwards, we are going to be at the table with the red tablecloth back there. You can come and ask us more questions, but we'll also have an opportunity for you to sign up right away if you want to sponsor, or if you want to go home and pray about it, that's okay too. But I'll have my iPad out there, and you can sign up right away if you have a credit card. Otherwise, if you want to do it by check or something, I can try to figure that out with you. But we're just really hoping that our mission trip won't just be 1 week out of our lives, but it'll be something that continues on with those kids. So thank you guys for all of your support that you gave us before the trip and during the trip, and I just want to thank you in advance for all of the support that you are going to give these students. So thank you all. Let's give a round of applause for them. I think we're done.
We got to say thank you to these guys for going, for taking the risk to step out. So thank you, and for sharing. It takes a lot of courage just to get up there and say something as well. Now our challenge is to go out and to share those stories and to plant some seeds with people. And you go, I saw God at work in Jamaica. This is what I saw. That's powerful. And nobody can come up to you and go, but the Bible's not true. And we evolved from monkeys. And all of those kinds of arguments are all bogus when you walk up and you say, I saw God at work when I went to Jamaica, or when whatever, right? And that's what today is really supposed to be focused about. And you guys did a great job of sharing that. Thank you. Can we give them a hand? Good man. If the deacons would come forward, we're going to receive the offering at this point, and Sam's going to share a little bit with us as well, musically. You got that? Do you need any help? He's got that. Got it?